Hello, my name is Doris Rajan and I'm the Director of Social Development at IRIS, the Institute for Research and Development on Inclusion in Society. IRIS is a Canadian national and international institute. In this discussion of disability and work, we are focused on the question, how can people with disabilities attain meaningful jobs and inclusive workplaces where all people with disabilities feel safe, supported, and productive? For the past decade, IRIS has been developing a strategy for inclusion that recognizes that people with disabilities are everybody. They belong to every socio-demographic group. Our strategy has been to work with the most marginalized populations, specifically Indigenous peoples, racialized migrant people, especially refugees, Black African peoples, and 2S LGBTQ+ communities, and people labeled with an intellectual, cognitive, and psychosocial disability, all from the perspective of women and gender diverse people. Why? Because, as we know, people with disabilities are some of the poorest people in Canada, and this is amplified when they belong to other acutely marginalized groups. In the context of disability and work in Canada's strategy, using this intersectional and solidarity approach is essential in developing the framework needed to achieve inclusive workplaces and comprehensive supports. Because if people in communities who are employers, policymakers, and educators do not have a full grasp of the depth of diversity that exists in this broad label of disability, then how can diverse people with disabilities even have the opportunity to apply for jobs, meet the qualifications of jobs, and once employed, feel welcomed, safe, and supported in ways that will allow them to succeed in their job? Okay then, what do community members need to know about diverse people with disabilities? Here are some questions to guide our learning. What does structural oppression look like, historically and in contemporary times? What is disability? While it's useful to understand the general types of impairments so that we can name and address distinct barriers for distinct solutions, we have to understand these categories in the context of systemic barriers. The social model of understanding disability is something that most of us doing this work understand. But for the majority of community members, such as employers, this is a significant shift in thinking. The next questions employers, decision makers need to ask is, how does intersectionality actually play out? Is it really intersection? The word intersection implies distinct identities crossing each other. But I don't walk into the room separately as a woman, go back out, and come back in as a racialized person. My identities are inseparable. When people live with more than one marginalized identity, their identities are co-constituted in interlocking systems of discrimination. In a recent study that I did with diverse people with disabilities, for example, I heard people's experiences of discrimination at times surpassing disability oppression, often when they spoke about racism, and at other times fused together and couldn't be separated, often when they talked about sexism and ableism. This told me that it is important to seek deeper understandings of how these different systems of oppression interact. That is, we can't center one marginalized identity over another. Finally, why solidarity? Because quite simply, for example, Indigenous peoples understand the systemic barriers and supports needed for Indigenous peoples with or without a disability better than mainstream disability advocates can. And if marginalized populations are just beginning the work around inclusion, they are the ones to be doing the asking, with people with disabilities from those communities leading the way. This intersectional and solidarity lens can help determine workplace-specific promising practices in terms of the array of supports diverse persons with disabilities need in order to do their job. IRIS has developed an audit tool to systematically examine organizations for inclusive intersectional access. Please contact us for more information. Lastly, I want to tell you about a 2-year initiative that IRIS is involved with called Accessibility in Action, Bridging the Disability Community and Regulated Entities under the Accessible Canada Act. We will be applying this intersectional solidarity approach, particularly when identifying disability-related barriers for federally regulated businesses, such as airlines, banks, etc. We need people with disabilities and organizations to contribute their expertise on access and inclusion in the implementation of this act. Please be in touch, and thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of the conference.